And that's the thing that is like completely freeing is you realize, man, everything is open for the taking. I just have to not care about looking like an idiot. And that at that point, you're free.
Hi, everyone. You're listening to Scaling Dev Tools. I'm joined today by Aaron Francis. Aaron is the founder of Tryhard Studios, and you might also recently know him from his work with PlanetScale, and also the person that built handwriting robots, which maybe we'll get onto. But and most importantly, Aaron is, which is what we're going to talk about today, Aaron is absolutely amazing at making videos for developers. Aaron, thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So recently, you ended your time at PlanetScale. That's not what this show's about. So if you've come for the goss there, Aaron's talked about it extensively on his own show. Mostly technical, so go listen there. What we're going to talk about today is how Aaron makes videos. That's what I would love to hear. So before I do that, I just wanted to read out some of the comments that are on Aaron's videos, and bear in mind these are all from a B2B PlanetScale channel, which is mostly about quite quote unquote dry topics.
The most boring, unsexy topic you can imagine. Yeah, you can say it. It's okay. I don't mind.
Okay,
yeah,
some would say.
Yeah.
So great stuff. Love that you mix in a bit of fun with the content. It's what got me to subscribe. Another person said, literally laughing out loud several times. Absolute gold. My partner's like, what are you watching? A guy seeding a database. PHP is wonderful. Your videos even better. Keep rocking. Your content is phenomenal. Explanation and visualization is great. One of the best DB channels out there. Hey man, your videos kick ass, and I cannot thank you enough for your approach with these. Your videos can be watched once and understood, every single one of them. I don't know how you do it, but the way you've picked to teach anything you teach is incredible. You freaking rock. Thank you.
That's super nice.
So these are like, you're teaching people how to seed databases, and you're getting this kind of reaction. There's also a lot of numbers there. I think you got up to like 30, 40,000 subscribers, hundreds of thousands of views on some of the top videos. So that is to say, Aaron is very good at making videos. And so today we're going to talk to him about how do you make videos for developers. So Aaron, how do you come up with ideas, first of all?
This episode is brought to you by WorkOS. At some point, you're going to land a big customer and they're going to ask you for enterprise features. That's where WorkOS comes in, because they give you these features out the box. Features like skim provisioning, SAML authentication, and audit logs. They have an easy-to-use API, and they're trusted by big dev tools like Vercel, as well as smaller, fast-growing dev tools like Knock. So if you're looking to cross the enterprise chasm and make yourself enterprise ready, check out WorkOS. We've also done an episode with Michael, the founder of WorkOS, where he shares a lot of tips around crossing the enterprise chasm, landing your first enterprise deals, and making sure that you're ready for them. Thanks, WorkOS, for sponsoring the podcast, and back to the show.
Yeah, man, I gotta go back and read those comments. That made me feel really good. I was like, oh wow, yeah, that is encouraging. That's so funny. Yeah, so it's there's a lot that goes into making videos. So I'm excited to like dig into all the different aspects. I think for me, one of like the overriding principles is I enjoy teaching. And so I think when a lot of people consider being on YouTube, I think there is more of a tendency to think I have to be Mr. Beast, or like I have to be Casey Neistat or Mark Rober or one of these people, maybe Mark Rober less so, but I have to be one of these people who is just like super exciting and like blowing up a train or like living underground for a week. And it's, that works. Like that's viable content. There's also a huge demand for like not pure education, because we see a lot of, people put webinars on YouTube and they just bomb because it's like, that's boring. But education with a little bit of like personality and a little bit of entertainment and a little bit of excitement. And that's kind of where I start from, like point zero is, what am I personally like excited about? Or what can I get excited about? Like, I historically have been really weirdly, into databases, which is an insane thing to say. And I promise I do have friends, but I've been into databases for a long time, right? And so that comes easy. But there are other topics that I have done YouTube videos on my personal channel where it's like, I wonder what I can figure out here. I'm kind of learning, and I'm translating this learning into teaching for you. And so I think step 0 is like, what are you interested in? Because if you don't care, it's going to be hard to make someone else care, I think is probably the biggest point there.
So those videos that you did where they were more like you were trying to come up with an idea, they were less popular than the ones where it was like you were just passionate about the topic.
Yeah, less popular, or just like a bigger internal struggle for me. Like coming up with an idea that I'm like excited about, and then doing, because it's a lot of work, which we'll talk about, and then doing all the work that goes a lot. It's a lot easier relatively if I care about the thing that I'm teaching. You can still I'm sure, produce videos that do super well that you hate the content of, and you're gonna die. Like your insides will be hollowed out, and you will be one of these YouTubers that's like, hey, I burned out, I'm gonna go live on a farm. And I don't feel any of that stress or pressure, because the thing that I'm teaching, I'm really excited about, I'm really interested in. And maybe, in 10 years I'll burn out and go live on a farm. But until then, I plan to like enjoy the content that I'm producing. And so for me, that's like before the starting line is, do I care about this?
Yeah, I agree that. Well, at least from my perspective, just from podcasts, like I feel that in that sometimes I mostly interview guests that I want to hear about, and it makes it so much easier.
Yeah, totally. And then I think, so if there's a content area, topic, whatever you're excited about, then the question is like, how do you come up with video ideas? And I think once you start, you can't stop. And it feels weird to be like, before you start, you think, how am I ever going to come up with an idea? After you start, the question is, how do I have enough time to do all of these ideas that I have? And I think that's really the same with like almost anything that you do in life. Like once you start into a hobby, for example, then you notice that there are lots of other people that do that hobby. You'll see things on the internet that relate to your hobby. And it's just kind of like, once you're in the zone, you start to notice things out in the world that you didn't notice before. And it's the exact same with YouTube videos or any kind of video that you're producing. So like when I'm in the zone for, teaching MySQL content, and I'm like scrolling on Twitter, which I do all the time, I'll come across a tweet that's something interesting about either MySQL or a database or, application framework or something. And I'm like, ooh, that's a good idea. I should add that to my list. And so it's like you prime your brain to say, hey, I'm working on X thing. And then you walk out into the world and X is just everywhere and you see it all over the place. And so that's the first thing that I would encourage people to not worry about, is like, you'll come up with ideas. That's not going to be the problem. The problem is going to be having time to do all the ideas that you want to do.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, once you're in it and you're following things that you want to do, there's going to be a lot of ideas. Infinitely
many and finite time. So I think, once you get like, let's say you come up with an idea. So the way that I start is there's always something that I want to teach. And so it's a technique or a pattern or something I found in the documentation or something that's like, this is the core educational nugget. And I think where I have had a lot of success is wrapping a core educational nugget in an interesting, entertaining, hopefully funny, like hopefully encouraging package. So like in the middle is, hey, you're going to learn, you're going to learn how this obscure database thing works. Wrapped around it is personality and excitement and humor and all of this stuff. And you kind of sneak. It's like feeding. How do you feed a dog a pill? You cover it in peanut butter, and then you're like, "Hey, do you want some peanut butter?" And they eat it, and you're like, "I'm so much smarter than you." And it's kind of like that. People on YouTube want to be entertained, right? And so you give them some entertaining like packaging, title, thumbnail, but importantly, not a misleading title and thumbnail. I'm very adamant about that. You have to give them something that is intriguing, that piques their curiosity, and then you fulfill that promise in the video. You don't make up something and put it in the thumbnail just because people will click on it. Like that is a short-term gain for a long-term loss. But you do have to be a little bit entertaining, and I think that's where I've had a lot of success there.
Yeah, and was there when you started doing the videos, did you consciously make it more entertaining, or was it something that kind of just came naturally or developed?
Yeah. I think it's come naturally. Whenever, so I have a course on screencasting, which is like, how do you teach stuff via screencasting? And one of the things I say in there is like, you always want to be yourself, right? You don't want to adopt a persona that is not your own, because I think, again, that's a way to burn out really quickly because you feel like you're playing a character, and that just feels really hard to me. So that's rule number one, is be yourself. Rule number two is you got to crank up yourself. You got to crank it up a notch or two. Like whatever you are, when you go on video, you need to be more of that on video than you would in a coffee shop with a friend, right? Because you like, one, I think on video you come across as like more downbeat. Not you personally. I'm not. Yeah, this isn't an attack to you.
Yeah. Go subscribe to the channel so you can see.
Yeah. One, a person, an individual, comes across just like a little more downbeat on camera, and I think some of that is like people just feel weird being excited alone in the room talking to a camera, and that's what you're doing. You're an insane person because you're in your spare bedroom waving your hands and shouting at a camera, and it's like that's objectively insane. But if you don't ramp it up a little bit, your YouTube videos are going to come across really downbeat, and people just aren't going to watch no matter how good the content is.
Have you got any tips for someone who wants to kind of get themselves in that zone and make themselves a bit more upbeat?
Yeah, for sure. I think find creators that you know, like, and trust, and see what they're doing. And I don't think it's important that you like look up to, again, Mr. Beast. I don't think that that's relevant at all. I think it is relevant that you find somebody that you want to emulate, and you take bits of what they're doing and think, how does this, like, what is true about what they're doing that aligns with what I want to do? And so you look at maybe their energy or their pacing or their delivery style, and you think, okay, that is applicable to me. And so how can I apply that to my delivery or my presentation? What I do, like especially when I'm doing a course, is I will watch back. Like I'll watch back the previous 2, 3, 4 videos that I have done before I start a new one. So like I come in, come in the morning, and I'm like, all right, I got to record a course video. I need to be real sure that I'm matching the energy of the videos I've already done. And so like even who I feel like it comes naturally to me, even I watch back my old stuff like from the day before, just to make sure that I'm like, oh yeah, this is the vibe, like this is the pace, this is the tone. You got to move faster, because if I walk in groggy on a Thursday morning and record a course, but on Wednesday afternoon I was amped, like that's going to be weird for the people watching it, right? And I think the same applies to YouTube, is just watch people that you like, or if you feel like you really nailed one, watch that and get that vibe like instilled, and then just turn on the camera and like and go. I think that like the meta or like the philosophical thing there is you have to let go of what you think other people are thinking about you. And I think there's a real feeling inside of me and inside of a lot of creators of like, this is a little bit cringy. And like, it is a little bit cringy to, again, be in your spare bedroom making a video about Laravel at 9:30 at night. And like, wow, that's like, you're trying really hard there. But I think the thing is like, whenever people watch that, people want to like glom on or attach themselves to somebody that's excited about what they're doing. And so while you are feeling like, people are like, my friends from high school are going to look at this and be like, why is this guy trying YouTube? You just have to let it go. You just have to say, I don't care. This is what I want out of my life. And I'm going to be excited about what I'm doing.
Yeah. I completely agree on that. And side note, I feel you have this, I think you talk about this philosophy that you've got about like just positivity and encouragement and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. Yeah. I think, one of the things that like, I could pull up my Twitter bio. I don't remember exactly what it says, but like on Twitter, I'm a sincere poster. I don't do cynicism. I rarely do sarcasm on Twitter because it communicates so poorly through text. But like my hope and my dream for my personal like public persona is that people are encouraged and inspired and like empowered to work hard at the dreams that they have. And so my whole thing, and this is again an amped up version of my internal beliefs, like that is true to my core. And on public channels, I'm very like, I push that a lot because one, it's something I believe in. And two, I think it's something that specifically developers need to hear. Like, hey, if you put yourself out there, something good is going to happen. And I think developers are often like hyper logical, and that sometimes leads to cynicism. And then you look at people that are putting themselves out there and you think like, wow, why are they getting to speak at all the conferences? And why are they getting all of the benefits? And it's like, I know the answer. The answer is because they put themselves out there. And that is available to everyone. Like that pathway, it's the exact same pathway that I've walked, is available to every single person who is like brave enough to say, I don't care. I'm going to start publishing blog posts, videos, tweets, whatever it is. And that's available to everybody. And I'm trying to tell everyone you can do it. And it's like, I just have to keep saying it.
Yeah. And I feel like if you have this internal belief, coming back to your point about like just getting over like your high school friends, there's those thoughts of them saying, he's got a podcast now.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. That's exactly it. You remember Jack from high school?
Yeah.
That's a podcast. Yes, exactly.
I don't know why my high school friends had an American accent, but
that's great.
Yeah. Exactly. So, but I feel like if you have that view, then maybe you don't think about that as much because you're projecting the world around you is going to be encouraging as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. And I kind of like, I look at that and think like, oh, I wonder if my high school friends are watching. And honestly, maybe, but really the answer is like, no, they're worried about their own lives. They're worried about what people think of them. Everybody's worried that everyone else is thinking about you when it turns out everybody's thinking about themselves. And turns out you can do whatever you want and nobody can stop you. And that's the thing that is like completely freeing is you realize, man, everything is open for the taking. I just have to not care about looking like an idiot. And that at that point you're free.
Yeah, I think that was like, yeah. Look, we had the climax of the episode already.
Shoot,
show's over, everyone. Sorry. Okay, so circling back to we're going to go from the high to like just boring details. So once you've got the idea, you're in the right zone. You've got the right energy. you coming with like a very clear plan on what you're saying, or is it like something that's kind of...
Yeah, there are many reasonable ways to do this, and I will tell you what mine is. My way to actually record a video. So you've got your idea, and then you've figured out what the angle is, and the angle is very important. So like, I did for a concrete example, I did a video about what has changed in PHP, the language, what has changed in PHP in the past 10 or so years. Okay. So if you're listening right now, which logically you are listening, if you're listening, you may think that sounds like a boring video. What's new in the past 10 years in PHP? Like, okay. But so that's the content idea. That's the thing. That's the nugget of like, I want to show people that PHP is like, has advanced. The angle or like the packaging is, and this is the title that I gave the video, is PHP doesn't suck, parentheses, anymore. And so like, even in the title alone, and so like in the thumbnail, I'm holding the PHP logo in both hands, and I think it's like PHP is greater than PHP or something like that. And so it's like PHP is better than PHP. And so even in the title and the packaging alone, it's like, hey, PHP used to suck, but it doesn't suck anymore. And so I got these comments of like, PHP never sucked. And I'm like, great, that's fine. I don't really, so I got the people that are like huge PHP stans. And then I got the people that were like, oh, PHP definitely sucked. I wonder why it doesn't suck anymore. Right. And so I kind of got both sides of that one. And that one, I mean, I think that one's done 300,000 views, which like,
wow,
for a video about the changes in PHP in the last 10 years is insane.
Yeah, I guess the boring version of that video was when you just go through a big list of changes and just say, and the title is what's new in PHP.
Yeah. Nobody watches that. Like, I wouldn't watch that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't watch that. I'm a PHP developer, and I'd be like, I don't care. This is stupid.
Yeah.
And so that goes from content to angle, and now we're like at recording. So you got your vibe right. You're ready to go. You've got your angle. The way that I record is bullet points. And there are reasonable minds differ on this. And so I'm not militant about this. Some people do a full-on script, and that helps them. What I find is a full-on script feels a little bit stifling to me and feels a little bit restrictive and puts me in a different zone. It puts me in like robot reading a script zone. And that may just be because I'm a bad actor. And like, if I was a better actor, that would be a more viable strategy. But for me, I basically know what the signposts are, or like what the waypoints are, and figuring out how to get from, all right, I got to spin up the project. I got to install this thing, and then I'm going to show this demo, and then I'm going to sign off with this. Like, figuring out my way through that is a little bit of like, it's a little bit of jazz. I don't play music. I've never played jazz, but I imagine it's a little bit like jazz, right? It's like every time is slightly different. And on the way through, I might find a funny turn of phrase or a funny joke. And I'm like, oh yeah, if I do another take, I'm going to say that joke again. Cause that came out of nowhere, which I think is important, which gives it that like that energy, that liveness. But I'm going to say it again because that was a pretty good joke. And so I find that the bullet points and the knowing like, all right, you just got to get through this section and then you can stop and think about the next section. I find that to be really helpful for me. And it also coincides with the way that I edit, which is like, I usually do a big, talking head of me first. And then I do a screen showing what I'm working on with me in the corner. And so even as I'm recording, I'm thinking, what are the edit points here? Like, I want to get through the intro, the talking head with 0 cuts. And so I may end up taking that part 5, 6, 10 times. And so instead of like struggling through it once and then going back and chopping it to pieces, I just trash it. And I'm like, great. Now I kind of know better what I'm going to say. And I'm going to say it over. And I'm going to say it over and over until I get it right, which is like, my goodness, it's a 30-second clip, and I can do that. Like I I may not be good at a lot of things, but I can get through 30 seconds without stumbling. And then I know, like, great, now I can rest a little bit because there's a natural edit point right there where I'm going to switch to the screen. And so I can kind of queue up, like, all right. So now I got to do this and this and this. All right, let's go from there. And I start again. And if I mess up, I just go back to what I know is the edit point and I start over. And so it's a real like fits and starts kind of like stochastic or sporadic process. And sometimes I'll get all the way through a video and think, boy, that sucked. And I know now having delivered that content, I know how I should have delivered it. And I just start over. And it's like that time, it just takes me 50% as long because I know exactly the best path through now that I've stumbled through it once or twice.
And when you say that, like stumbling, could that be like actually you're coding and talking at the same time? And kind of going through that.
Yeah. So when I say stumble, when you have major points that you want to hit and you leave the sinew or the connective tissue, you leave that blank to be just ad-libbed on the spot. Sometimes it just sucks. So sometimes I'll be like, great, we need to set up this, let me install this dependency. And now, well, you know what? Now I don't know what we're going to do next. And it's like, shoot, I dorked that one up, didn't I? And so, but you do that a couple times and then you like, it's kind of like, I think they're called cow paths, where it's like you walk on that grass enough that it becomes a trail. And as I'm recording, I kind of figure out what that trail is. And I'm like, oh, actually, it would be better if I didn't do that. It would be better for the video if I swapped this order. And now having gone through it, that much is very clear to me. And so I don't really I am never going to do a course or a video on like the most efficient way to record videos because my way is not very efficient. Like it would be probably way more efficient if I were to sit down and like write it out and then be like, how does this flow feel? I just can't do it. Everything, like all of, I think what is the magic comes from almost the spontaneous discovery of that sinew, that connective tissue as I'm going. And that's where like the little jokes, the little facial expressions, the little, that was kind of funny. Like, let's move on. That kind of stuff comes out of just like performing, basically.
Would you say, how long would you say each like segment would be that?
Yeah, so I call them chunks. And so I chunkify my videos, which is a technical term. And I think each segment, each chunk is max 2 minutes, maybe 3, because there's so much like, the opening talking head has got to be quick because you got to get attention and get to the point. Otherwise people are going to click away. So that, that's 30 seconds or less. But then you get into like a coding, a coding chunk, and it's like, this could legitimately go on for 6-7 minutes, just like screen sharing. Here's the thing. You're not going to be able to make it 6-7 minutes like without fumbling or needing to cut. And I don't hate jump cuts. Like I don't hate showing a cut. I do hate the YouTube style where they cut every 3 seconds. I do hate that. But if you were to stay on your code editor and your face cam bubble for 6 or 7 minutes, people are going to get a little bit bored. Even if the content is good, you kind of want to switch up some visuals every now and then to keep that little dopamine, like to keep it pumping out, right? So you do 2 or 3 minutes of coding. Maybe you mess up once and you cut that out and it's no big deal. But you do 2 or 3 minutes of coding and then you switch back to full screen, like face cam here in the studio. And you're like, you explain something and you move your hands, you wave your hands around a lot. And you're like, all right, let's get back to it here. Or you say like, here's what we're going to do next. We just did this. Now we're going to do this next. Let's get back to it. Boom, you're back to screen sharing. And you have 2 great edit points there. So you do your first chunk, you do a talking head, you do your second chunk, and then it's like, great. You can do the same thing when you're switching between, let's say, code editor and browser or terminal or whatever. That's a natural point where you can kind of like, great, we're done with that part. Let's talk for a second. Now let's switch over to the browser. Or you can stay in the face bubble and just switch over to the browser. But now if I need to cut, I can start with, all right, now we're in the browser, because that's kind of a natural story cut point, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. And in total, your videos it seems like most are around 10 minutes, is that?
Yeah, 6 to 15 is probably what I shoot for on YouTube. With like course content, I can go a little shorter or longer because I know that people are more invested. And so I know that the pace can be a little slower, the tone can be a little slower, the education can be a little deeper, and the duration doesn't matter as much. But on YouTube, I'm shooting for 6 to 12 to 15 minutes.
And is that driven by the kind of chunks that you think make good content, or is there some kind of algorithmic, YouTube algorithm?
I don't. Maybe I should, but I don't let the algorithm tail wag the dog very much. Of course, I want to do what the platform wants so that the platform will promote me. More than that, I want to do what I want to do. And so the tension is, how do you combine what the platform wants with what do you want to do with your life? And here's what I don't want to do with my life. I don't want to make clickbait thumbnails. I don't want to pretend to be surprised about something that I'm not surprised about. And so like, there's this tension between what does Aaron want to do with his life? And it's just like, I don't know, have some fun, make some videos, teach some people some stuff. And what does the platform want? And the platform wants people to click on thumbnails and watch videos. And so finding your sweet spot between what do you want to do with your life and what does YouTube want you to do with your life, that's very important. And you can easily go down the rabbit hole of, I'm going to do with my life what YouTube wants me to do with my life. And I feel like, oh, that feels awful. So I don't think it's algorithmically driven. I think I usually have a piece of content that dictates 6 to 15 minutes. And if it dictates 45 minutes, I'll break that up into 2 videos because I don't really want to try to do a 45-minute video. That just feels too long to me.
Yeah. When you've been making videos in the past, like a lot of the MySQL, however you say it.
Whatever you want.
We'll get into the debate. How were you thinking about like these explicitly are targeted at developers who are senior engineers and have, or was it? Yeah, I guess that's the question.
Yeah, that's a good question. You don't even need the or. Yeah, that's a good standalone question. I definitely have a persona in mind. And specifically with the YouTube video, or I'm sorry, the MySQL videos, the persona is the meaty middle. So in the database world, you've got the low end neckbeards, right? All the DBAs. And I grew up, my dad was a DBA. So like I've inherited the right to say neckbeards. So please don't at me. But like that's actually how I learned SQL was,
really?
My dad was a DBA and he would come home and he would show me how to do stuff. It was super cool. And so that is a small and diminishing segment of the population, right? Because all the DBAs are going to the big platforms and people don't really have in-house DBAs as much as they used to. At the very, very top end is people who are like, I actually don't want to know what a database is. I just want to interact with an API. And I will do gets and posts all day long. And if you use a database underneath, fantastic. I don't care. So those are the two bell ends of like the curve. In the meaty middle is application developers that don't want to be DBAs, but they just need to know how to freaking use a database. They don't need to know how to like host it and provide 9 nines of redundancy and reliability or whatever, but they want to know like, where should I put indexes? Not only where should I put them, how do I know where to put them next time, right? Like, how can I, as an application developer who's not going to like run my own database, how can I become an expert user of the database? And so that's kind of where I targeted. So I never ever talked about like, here's how to host MySQL or here's how to do, bin log replication or anything like that. It's just, I don't know. Hopefully your platform handles that. Like that's not your concern. And if it is your concern, maybe this video isn't for you. But if you are an application developer who wants to be an expert user of a database, this is great. And it just so happens that content niche was wide open and frankly is still wide open. And so I'm hoping to tackle that as an independent. But I think the whole like, hey, you're an intermediate. This is databases 201. This is not 101. And this is not 401. This isn't a graduate level class. This is like, you're smart, you're a developer, you've touched the back end before, and you need to know like, what do you do next? And that's where I slot it in.
Yeah, that's a really nice way to put it. I like the kind of college analogy as well. Yeah, that makes sense. And what did it look like to actually target that audience? Was there anything that you did, or was it more of a just keep them in mind as you go?
No, it was a lot of what I did. So we'll go with like, the educational nugget is wrapped in some sort of packaging. The packaging, they're like, because of who I was targeting, that dictated that the packaging look a certain way. And so a lot of times the packaging around a database nugget was an application angle. And so it's like, hey, your SaaS this is actually a video I did. Your SaaS is slow and falling over because you don't know where to put indexes on your database. Let's learn how to do that and then apply it back to your SaaS application and see that it doesn't fall over anymore. And so like, if I had been targeting DBAs, I wouldn't be talking about like, here's how your SaaS application works and here's how you can do a query to find what's slow. Like, they know all of that. They want something deeper and they don't care about, the SaaS framework. And another one would be how to do a specific thing at the application layer, aided by a database technique. So here's a way that you can find all the email addresses that use the little plus sign trick for Gmail, right? So you can say Aaron plus spam at gmail.com and it goes to Aaron at gmail.com, right? That's a Gmail trick. There's a way in the database to like remove those plus signs and see if you have any duplicate signups. And so it's like the framing is like your SaaS application has free tier abuse because of this Gmail trick. The nugget is here's how you create a virtual generated column in MySQL. And it's like, those are very different things, right? One is very clickable, one is very educational, but if you throw them together, you get best of both worlds. You get to execute on your pure and noble mission of teaching the world about databases, but you also get people to click on it because otherwise they're not going to click on it. So because nobody knows what a virtual generated column is, which is the point of the video. So if you put that in the title, people are going to be like, don't know what it is. Don't need it. I'm going to go watch this video about outer space, which is a lot of what I watch on YouTube. So that's kind of like, that's the audience that I'm going for dictates a little bit about the packaging that I put around a nugget.
And it's like, is this how do you know that founders care about like the plus? Because I guess like maybe that one, do you actively go out to try and find out, like talk to people and that sort of?
Yeah, you can approach it from either direction. You can start with your nugget, which I did on that one. So I started with virtual generated columns are really cool. That was like, that was my mega brain thought was like, oh man, that's cool. And so then at that point, it's like, now the challenge is, how do you wrap that in something that is relatable, something that is interesting? I knew about that Gmail, plus sign trick. And I thought, I can make up a story there. Like I can make up a story of you've got a free tier and people are skirting around it. And like, here's how you can do it with a virtual generated column. So for that video, I thought, what is the nugget? And then where in, like, as an application developer myself, where might I use that? And then that becomes the packaging. You can approach it from the other direction where you see, and this is again, like you're out in the world and you see things and your brain says, hey, you're working on something similar to that. Like you should notice that thing. And you could see something on Twitter that's like, these freaking people are signing up with a plus sign in their email address and they're getting around our unique user registration. And you could look at that and think, ooh, that actually lines up with something I just read about virtual generated columns. I finally have an angle for that nugget that I couldn't figure out before. And so you can approach it either way. It doesn't really matter. As long as you're like keeping your eyes open, you're going to see the angles. And suddenly it's like every I only spend time on Twitter. Every tweet becomes a potential database angle for a video. And you're like, how could I? And another good example is UUIDs. So like people always argue about GUIDs and UUIDs and all that stuff. And you see that on Twitter enough and you're like, great, now I have an angle for how to do primary keys that are UIDs in MySQL and why you maybe wouldn't and why, it depends on which version of a UUID you use, but you see enough of these real world conversations and the angles start to create themselves.
Yeah. And maybe you covered this, but like, what is an angle? What makes it an angle or a story? Yeah. Well, kind of, I guess I wanted to go back to like story. I think you mentioned that word a little bit. Like, is angle the same thing as story? Is it?
Yeah. So angle, story, narrative, packaging, point of view, all kind of like circle around this ephemeral idea of like, how are you going to teach this thing? You can, and universities do, often teach things head on with no creativity. And it's like, here is the information. And like, maybe, that's what you pay for in college. And so you're sitting there like absorbing it and being bored.
It's hard. Yeah.
It's hard. You can do that. I think more, you can do that more easily in a course where people have paid money and are sitting down to learn a thing. You need less of an angle because the person has expressed their interest and said, I am here to learn this thing. Please teach me this thing. And so the nugget becomes more important in that arena. But when you're on YouTube, you need something that is intriguing or compelling or like speaks to the audience. And so while it is possible to teach a concept head on YouTube, I have found it more effective to have some sort of like hook or narrative structure or storyline or a way to say like, you as the consumer, this matches your persona, and I'm going to appeal to your persona and teach you something that you didn't know yet. Because most of the time, people aren't going to click on things that they don't know they need to know, right? If you don't know you need to know something, you're just going to move on. But if you see something on YouTube that is like, hey, Aaron, you need to know this thing as a SaaS operator. And it turns out the thing I need to know is database specific, like, oh, well, that worked out pretty well. But as I'm scrolling, I don't think I need to know about virtual generated columns. Why would I need to know that? I'm not a DBA. I don't need to know that. And so you have to have some sort of like, how are you going to weasel your way into this person's mind? How are you going to convince them with a title and a thumbnail that they should care about this esoteric thing that you have to teach? Well, you put it in terms that they'll understand. And that's kind of like the angle, the packaging, the story around that.
Yeah. So, okay. So let's say we've got this episode, right? Which we're recording. And I guess the nugget here is how to make YouTube videos people watch, or although that feels a bit too, maybe that's the more compelling part as well.
That's pretty good. Yeah. That's awesome, man. You're a natural.
No. So, but the nugget is like the nitty gritty of like the process of making developer videos. It's like the part where you talk about segments, chunks, and then the package would be around thinking around like people listening to this have dev tools they want developers to use their product. So it's like trying to tie making YouTube videos, like chunking, recording YouTube videos. The good method to do that with like getting users. So it will come back to just getting users. So,
yeah. Okay. So I think it's hard to take a podcast as an example of this, for one, because we've covered 8 different nuggets, right? We've covered a lot of things. We've covered a lot of things that are like, one should learn this. And there's if there are 8 of them, there are 8 different packages that you could put around it, right? So like a good framing or packaging for one segment of what we just talked about is like don't let YouTube ruin your life as a creator. Right? That's a good, like,
so good.
That's a good, like,
so
I would
good.
click on that.
Yeah.
And then the conversation is the part where we talk about what do you want to do with your life and what does YouTube want you to do with your life? Right. And so, like, the content delivers on that. But if you were to title that part of the video or this entire video or podcast differently, more like straightforward, like a conversation with Aaron Francis about YouTube.
That's what I do.
Who's Aaron? Nobody knows Aaron. Nobody knows me. And if you're not actively pursuing YouTube education, you're not going to click on that. And even if you are, you've got no idea who I am and why do I want to listen to this guy talk about YouTube? I don't know him. I've never seen him on YouTube, so he must not be big. But even if I'm not creating on YouTube, like don't let the algorithm ruin your life is pretty clickable. Like that sounds, tell me more. That sounds like drama. I love drama. Everyone loves drama. And so I think that's one example of the nugget and the framing. I think for, everybody that's listening to this is trying to scale dev tools, but based on the name of the podcast, right? So you have to imagine there are lots of people out there with, let's say, dev tool platforms that are really good and powerful. If you are going broad, which I think on YouTube, you have to go broad. So like if you're going broad, what you don't want to do is say, how to integrate Next.js with Clerk. It's like, well, I don't use Next and I don't use Clerk, so I don't care. But if you're Clerk and you're like, how do we go broad on YouTube? Well, you've got an infinite vein of content to mine, right? So you're in the whatever authentication, authorization, role-based access. You're in that world. You start to teach people maybe best practices about authentication or authorization, or like even better, stories of it gone wrong. Everybody loves drama, right? And so I think if you're scaling a dev tool, then you want to highlight the general use cases of the tool that you are a host of, right? So for example, PlanetScale was a MySQL host. It did a lot more. It did a whole lot more than just like MySQL in the cloud. But the angle that I took on all of the content is like almost MySQL, but even broader is just like how to do this thing with a database. And while you're here, you got to put your database somewhere, right? Have you heard of planetscale.com? And so like that's the way that you go super broad. And instead of saying integrating Next.js with Clerk, which is good content for SEO and for middle of the funnel and maybe bottom of the funnel, like tutorials have a purpose. But if you want to go super broad, then like 8 authentication mistakes you're probably making is like, oh, yeah, I wonder what mistakes I'm probably making. And then you're like, oh, Clerk does this. Clerk handles all of these for me. That's neat. I just learned something and heard about this service that I'm going to go check out. And so that's kind of the like, you teach your SaaS maybe for middle of funnel people. You teach some concepts. That's great for top of funnel people.
Yeah, that's really good. So Clerk team, Nick, you've got a free.
Yeah, I had several coworkers from PlanetScale go over to Clerk, and so Clerk is on the brain. Yeah.
Awesome. That's amazing. I'm going to say this has helped me. Have you got time for one more question? We've gone.
Yeah, hit me. Okay, what do I have to do? I got laid off. I'm unemployed. Tell me, what do you got?
Okay, one more question. So I do YouTube now, and I'm trying to get better. As people will see, our channel is a work in progress. Okay. I go and look at the charts they give you. They give you lots about like retention and things like that. Like, do you look at those charts much? Do you get much insight once you've put the episode out over like why it worked, why it didn't work, that sort of thing?
Man, I'm so vibes based that I
Yeah.
barely ever look at those charts. I think the only time I've ever looked at one of those charts is to see like the first 30-second retention across several videos and realize, oh, you got to get to the point faster. But beyond that, couldn't tell you the last time I looked at one of those charts and was like, I lost a bunch of people in the middle of this video. I wonder what I did here. And I'm not saying that that's a good thing. Like, that's not a good personality trait. I don't know if it's bad, but I'm not saying that it's good that I'm like, no, don't look at the metrics, vibes only. But that's how I operate. I think I could probably learn a lot by like going very data driven. But again, like, what do I want to do with my life? I want to have fun and make videos, and I don't want to be beholden. I don't want to be beholden to metrics, but metrics are really important. And so how do you square that circle? Like, how do you combine those two things? I don't know. That's tough. I definitely look at view counts and like, what was the best video of my past 5 videos and what can I learn from the fact that this one popped off and this one didn't. I definitely look at that, but in terms of like, I wonder when men 20 to 29 dropped off in this video, I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea.
Yeah, okay. I guess it works if you nail those like principles. You've got a story, got a nugget, execute on it. You don't need to dig into all those.
Yeah, and I think almost the qualitative feedback is more interesting to me than the quantitative feedback, because I feel like, and the data scientists are going to scream at me right now, I feel like the qualitative feedback is an expression of the quantitative feedback. So let's say like I do a video and it does super well and people comment they liked certain parts or certain things. That tells me a lot in the comments of like, what was good about this video? What do individual people like? And I can probably extrapolate that to say, if, 500 people commented on this video and the most common things were 1, 2, and 3, I bet the 200,000 people that watched the video feel pretty similar to the people that commented on the video. They didn't say anything. And likewise, if I do a video that kind of bombs, and people are like, hey, why would I need this? Or I don't understand what you are talking about here. That to me is an extrapolation of like what everyone else was thinking, but didn't comment. And so I read every single comment and I weigh those comments pretty heavily. I think a lot of people on YouTube are like, don't ever read the comments. Like, why? Yeah. I mean, yeah, sometimes people are mean, but again, like, I don't really care about that. But like, I read every single comment and it's like, hey, that person or these people really liked the humor or the pace or the examples, or maybe they didn't like the examples, and that's helpful for the future.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And also, like, this is something that you're spending so much of your life on. Like, if you just like make a video and then you get paid and you move on, and it's like, yeah, okay. I feel like knowing that people liked the videos is extremely
yes. And like, I feel a certain like maybe responsibility is too big of a word, but I feel a certain responsibility, we'll just say it, to interact with the people that are interacting with me.
Yeah.
And I'm not Casey Neistat. I would love to be Casey Neistat, but I'm not. And so I'm not just like throwing videos over the wall and having 10 million people watch it and I don't stand a chance of like responding. Like, I'm just a little guy, right? And so when I put out a video, it's like, hey, did you guys like it? I kind of want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Like, can you tell me if it was good or bad, or like what your favorite part was? I feel like a proud mom. I'm like, hey, look at my son. He's doing great.
Yeah.
Talk to me about it. And that feels like it engenders a lot more trust and a lot more like cohesion amongst like the audience or whatever.
Yeah.
They're just like my friends who happen to be on YouTube.
Yeah. And may end up buying a large enterprise database contract.
Exactly.
Maybe.
Yeah. And I think that's another point that if you're running a a DevTools YouTube channel, be an individual or be a collection of individuals. Don't be a nameless, faceless corporate blob, because nobody cares about corporate blobs and nobody has affectionate feelings towards corporate blobs. But if your corporate channel is, for the sake of redundancy and like future proofness, if your corporate channel is 2 or 3 or 4 people, that's great. Let them be people. Like let the audience get to know the characters of the show, right? We love Jim and Pam, and you love to get to know the characters of the show. We follow them for 10 seasons on The Office, and it's like, yeah, I like those individual people. And it's the same deal for corporate YouTube channels. It kind of has to be an individual, if not a small collection of individuals.
Yeah. So which companies have the most corporate blob? No,
you just look up any of them. All of them.
All of them.
Yeah. All of them except, just recently deceased Planet Scale. Except for them.
Yeah. I will ask you though, if, okay, so I've got 2 more questions. We've gone way over, but this is longer than usual. Listeners, forgive me. I'm nerding out here. I'm enjoying listening, asking questions.
Listen, if you're still listening, you're enjoying it. So that's on you. You can pause it at any moment.
Okay. So one question I have is, what channels should people go to get like inspiration beyond Planet Scale? So for other dev tools that you think are doing like really well with their YouTube strategy.
Goodness. That's a hard question to answer.
0. There are none.
Yeah, there are good ones, of course. I think if you're looking for inspiration, look outside of the dev tools niche. And so look at other niches that have this figured out and have had it figured out for a long time. And that would include construction, woodworking, furniture making,
lawn mowing.
Yeah, I mean, seriously.
Since you were saying that, I get so many lawn mowing.
Yes, it's like videos the before and after. If we mowed this old woman's lawn for her for free, it's like, okay, you're not going to do that, but there's something that you can learn there. And I think watching YouTube strictly for learning how to do YouTube is interesting. You will get down a rabbit hole of the same ideas, the same techniques, the same how to edit your video like Mr. Beast. If you go on YouTube with the explicit goal of learning how to YouTube, you're going to get fed a lot of videos about Mr. Beast and Casey Neistat. And like some of that meta learning is interesting. I think more importantly, you need to develop your own taste. And developing your own taste can be watching construction videos and then watching tunnel digging videos and then watching videos about outer space. And like, where are these examples coming from? These are the videos that I watch. Like that's my YouTube universe. And it has recently started getting into like how to do one-man cinematography. Cause like I'm here by myself and I got to figure out how to do videos. And you take that, like you take the expertise of people who are just absolutely crushing it. And then you come back to this poor, decrepit dev tools space on YouTube and you're a genius, right? So you can just you can blow everyone away because everyone is doing webinars that are an hour and 40 minutes long and just throwing them on YouTube without even a custom thumbnail or anything. And so you just learn 2% of what the other niches have already figured out. And you just do that by consuming and developing your taste. And so as you're watching things that are entertaining to you, so you're actively cooking dinner and enjoying a construction show, take note of they're really funny, or they're really sincere, or they're really sarcastic, or they go real into detail, or they gloss over a lot of details, and just absorb that into your being and then translate it into your area of expertise.
Yeah. That's really, really awesome, actually. So yeah, setting the bar even higher, not looking just...
for sure. Definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So I have one question that we always ask, which is, do you have any kind of one takeaway for founders listening?
Yes. I think if you want to be on YouTube, and I think most people listening should want to be on YouTube. It is a distribution mechanism unlike anything ever seen before. If you want to be on YouTube, think about how you can go broad and how you can go pop education. Education, I think, should be your goal. And you should wrap that in something that is popular, something that is exciting, something that is interesting. How can you use your dev tool to go super broad to solve some problem? And then they find out about your company as a second order effect. That would be my charge to people who are trying to scale dev tools, is like, what's the most interesting thing your underlying infrastructure or underlying tool can do? Make a video about that.
That's fantastic. I'm going to be trying this stuff for my own things, and
great.
And one question one of our listeners suggested that I should ask, because and we did it once and it was apparently good, is like, are there any dev tools that you're excited about at the moment?
Yeah, I mean there are a lot. I am, I'm coming out of a hosted MySQL world, and so I'm now like unleashed and can start exploring some of the other database, startups or companies. And there are a lot of good ones in the SQLite world. Terso seems really awesome to me. And so I'm playing around with these database tools. Cloudflare has their workers, which I have been, on the outskirts of playing with those. But I come from like a Laravel/PHP world, and they don't have, PHP on workers. But there are ways to integrate over the API with Laravel, running stuff. And so like those kinds of things I'm very excited about. I am probably most excited about my newfound freedom to explore these database companies.
Okay. Amazing. And then, thank you so much, Aaron, for joining. And if people want to make videos, and can they get in touch with you?
Sure. Yeah. So if you want to have us help your company, so, me and my friend Steve, who is like a proper video producer, we've started a studio called Try Hard Studios because we try really hard. So you can find that at tryhardstudios.com. If you're an individual looking to like, how do I level up my screencasting videos? Screencasting.com is where I teach that. And if you're just wanting to hang out and waste a bunch of time, twitter.com/Aaron D. Francis. That's where I am all the time when I should be working.
Amazing. And let Aaron know that you heard on Scaling DevTools so that we can get him back on again.
I would love that. That would be awesome. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you again next week.